Okay, well, let's go ahead and start. And if anybody comes in late, we probably have a couple more people, but a couple of people couldn't come and wanted to see the recorded version. And I just wanted to welcome anybody who's new. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mostly be going over the page that we have online that you can access on your phone. You can print it all out also, almost everything. However, there's a lot of links that lead to other links. So if you print it, you're going to have a book by the time you get through, I think. And so using it on your phone is going to be easier if you can do that, but not everybody can. So let me start by showing you how to get there, and then we'll flick back to it. So I'm going to share, but I'm going to go back a page. Okay. The best way to get there is to Google LWVCA, League of Women Voters, Columbia area. You can just abbreviate it, and it'll come up, I think. You go there, and you look at where it says Our Work, across this black band, Our Work, and then you go to the drop-down menu, and you go to voter registration training, and that's not the end of clicks. Then you click down here on online voter registration training. And this is the page we'll be going over. So I just want to let you see what it all is. And it again has a menu bar with more here. So don't forget about the more, because a lot of the stuff you need, you might be able to get to more quickly down this menu bar than you can by scrolling down the whole page. And just leave that up to you, whatever works best for you. This is Christine's video that I may come back and play if we have time. I just want to make sure we have time to go over everything, but it's a really nice video. And there's another video that's longer. Christine's is just a welcome for about 5 minutes, but this one is about an hour long, but it's a discussion among several really experienced web members. So, I mean, league members. So you might find it good. This links to the printable handout, but again, as I said, and I'll go to that and show you. This is something I believe Mary might have created this. She's not here right now, and it has a lot of information. So it's probably worth it if you don't feel comfortable using your phone. It's probably really worth it to print this out, because it probably gives you most of what you'll need most of the time. It's the only problem with sharing is that sometimes things get a little weird. Yeah, let me stop the share for just a second and come back to it in a minute. It just takes a second to get back to that page. For some reason, doesn't want to do it. Let me move this and do that. Aha, here we are. Let's see. I'm sorry, sharing sometimes I don't do a very good job of. So those are things that you can do. And then let me show you, these are 2 sites that you should know. If you don't know them, it's really worth it to get familiar with your computer and your phone to be able to do this, because Vote 411 is the league site with enormous amounts of information on it. And there is a way that they can register it, but it has all kinds of information on the Vote 411 page. And at certain points, I'll show us how to go to that. Also, we have SC Votes. And SC Votes is the biggest site really that you should know about, because it is where they can directly register, directly get into information like whether they are registered, because a lot of people need to check registration. They can get into where their poll is. Usually it will tell them where that is, and it's a really important site to know about. So those 2 are important. This explains it. And I'm gonna
so on here, but you want to need this.
Can I ask everybody to mute themselves and then unmute if you have something to say? Because I'm hearing a little bit of talk. Everybody is hearing it, and it might be a little distracting. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this explains what the sites are. Now, there's two basic ways people can register. There's actually more, but these are the ones we often, very often, it's going to be the paper, excuse me, the paper registration form, if my voice ever comes back. This is not the new form, but it's not very different. On the new form, this stuff about the photo ID is above the oath that they need to sign, and this thing about landmarks has been taken off. And I will replace that if I can get it done, if I can figure out how to get that done. They don't have to fill out everything. And again, most of the time we go through and highlight. They need to be sure to check that they're a citizen and that they're 18. They need to be sure to check new registration or address change, which one they're doing. They do need to give their name, their race, the address where they live right now, but they don't have to worry about things like their mailing address unless it's different, whether it's inside or outside the city limits. That's nice. They need to give the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. They don't need to give the whole thing. It won't be wrong if they give the whole thing, but you know that's really an invasion of privacy if they give the whole thing. So just the last 4 digits will work. They need to give their birth date.
Nancy, I think Pam has a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't see the hands always.
That's all right.
What was your question, Pam? Can you unmute?
This is all new to me, but in terms of, I see in the race that they have all the variations with the race. Are they going to make any changes in terms of the sex thing? I'm just curious. That's more of a curiosity than.
I'm curious about that too, Pam. On the new form, it's still just male and female, which I
Okay.
know leaves a lot of people out.
Yeah.
So I hope they will change it, but we don't know that they will. You know, it is
was just more of a curiosity than.
right. I don't blame you. We asked that question when we saw the new form the other day, and it's not changed. All of this top stuff is the same. The only thing that's changed is reversing the oath and the photo ID, which I'll talk about.
And Nancy, I think that's why it's good for us to be very clear with people. You do not have to answer, the
Yes,
sex, so
you
that people
don't have to
feel
give sex.
that's not something they need to worry about or even think about.
Good point. And race, you'll notice they give a lot of options, and they give you the option of others, so you can write in, if you want to write in biracial, or if you're from Australia, or something, if it's not included here, you can do that. But sex, they're not doing that. However, thank you for that question, Joyce. That was good. They do need to give their birth date. It's good for them to give their phone, because the reason they need to give their phone is if there's something that's unclear or not right, they might call them. So do encourage them to do the phone. They don't have to do most people don't have a previous registration name, but if they do, they should fill it in, but most people don't have that. They do need to sign, and they probably would like to read what they're signing. So here's the oath about what all you're doing if you vote. So they sign, and they need to give the date. They don't need to worry about this. It won't be on the new forms. You might have an old form that has it, but it's not used, so they can ignore that. And the photo ID, they don't have to have a photo ID when they register, but they should take it. They will have to take it with them when they vote, or they won't be able to vote. So you don't need to look at it. You don't need to worry about copying it. I will say this is a little different if they're registering online. I think they need to take a picture of their photo ID and send it in if they're registering online. But with the paper registration, they don't have to worry about that. So let me ask, does anybody have, because this is in some ways, the most important thing to understand is how to do this paper thing. Does anybody have any other questions about the paper form before we leave it? There are some details about it that will come up on other sections, so don't hesitate to ask. But if we're sharing, you may need to ask verbally, because I can't see everybody when we're sharing. Okay,
Nancy,
yes,
I was just gonna say, I do think as a volunteer, it always helps to have what we need for them to complete highlighted by a
Right.
yellow marker. I know it helps me, so I just think anytime we're out to either have some that are already highlighted or go on and start highlighting some, so you don't, it just reminds me of what I need to be sure that they fill in.
absolutely. And so that, if there are problems like sex, to know that they don't have to fill that out is good to know, because you might have somebody that says, hey, I don't fit in either one of those. How about it? And then you say, you don't have to do that. Just leave that blank. Let me show you up here if you want to highlight, when you get a form, if you want to highlight it yourself, this has a list of the things that should be filled in, noting that the mailing address and the previous registration name only have to be in there if necessary, and the other things are just listed here, and they must sign and date. That's really important. I'm going to stop the share for a minute and go. I hope I can do this. So the other way that a lot of people may register. Now, let me say before we leave this, one advantage to the paper forms is that you can check that they've done it, they give it to you, you can know it's been done and turn it in. So from our point of view, the paper form is the best way, because we know what's on it and we know how to make sure it gets turned in. And let me say to those of you who are new, there's so many people here that I'm so glad there's so many people here who know more than me, but there are a couple of you who are new. If you're new, there's going to be somebody organizing the event. You're not going to be the only person. That person will be the one who'll collect them and turn them in. So you don't have to worry about that right away. But I will tell you how to do it in case somehow you wind up with a form that, that the leader didn't take in or something like that. But usually you'll have an organizer who will take up the forms and take them where they need to be. Now, the online registration is at Vote 411. Let me take this up here so that I can see it. They can register online at Vote 411. They can also do it at SC Votes. I usually take them straight to SC Votes because eventually 411 will click over there, I believe. But they can go through 411, especially if you want to encourage people to use Vote 411, which has a lot of other stuff like information about candidates. That would be a good thing to do. This is how to vote online at SC Votes, and it's very similar. And so it starts by asking if they have a driver's license and goes on from there into details about them. I'm going to say, yes, I have one. Then you give your name. And I'm not, since I'm already registered, I can't do it from here, but it will take them to another site that until they complete it. But it will ask for basically the same information that's on the paper form, but just in a different order. For example, it will ask for their driver's license or ID number, and notice that the red asterisk means it's required. So they do need to give their driver's license, or if they don't have a driver's license, if they have a state ID, it will have a number like the driver's license. You may have to help people find that if they aren't clear on it, but for most people. Once again, the Social Security number, I believe the last 4 digits are fine. And as always, you have to click that you're not a robot. And if you continue, there will be a little bit more. But this explains at least why they need to provide part of their Social Security number. So let's see if I can.
Nancy, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I'm learning as we go along, and it mentions gender online.
Yes, it
But
does.
can you go back and would you just go to that back to that screen and see what the drop down is? If
Go back to
And
that.
it is also asterisk as saying, as required, which is
I know.
different from what,
Yeah. And, yep, online. It's
I
always.
don't wanna derail what you're doing, but I just thought that
No,
was
no,
really
the
interesting.
questions are very good.
So here's the, yeah, right, online registration.
And we want to look at the SC votes
Yeah.
version. And we want to register online. And yes, I have a driver's license. Yes, and
Can you use the
gender.
drop down and what? No,
And then
oh, that's
it does give unknown, so this is
interesting.
really sad, but, and I don't like it, but it's what we got.
Yeah.
You can choose male, female, or unknown. I don't think unknown is a very, and
It,
people are not gonna like that.
no, I don't think that's good either, but
And maybe, but I'm sorry, folks, we live in South Carolina. I don't know whether or not we can get them to change that, but we could, we could try it. I think it's worth it. But unknown is about the only thing they'll be able to check there.
okay, thank you. That's interesting.
Yes, definitely. Let me go back to the main thing. Okay. Oh, we're still not back. Let's go back one more. So, online paper registration and online registration. Mostly you'll be working with paper, but you'll probably work a lot with online. And you may be giving out the Vote 411 cards that encourage them to register themselves online. And you won't know what's going on if that happens, unfortunately, because they'll just go off with it. They can register in person if they want to. I give the address for Richland County and Lexington County, but they can also, if they're from other counties, they can find them. Also at the registration offices, if they don't have a photo ID, they can get a voter registration with a photo at the registration office. We can't do that, but if you run into people who don't have a photo ID and don't want to go to the highway department, they can get a photo ID a voter ID with a photo at the registration office. They can also download the form, and this link right now does not work because they've changed that, and I will fix it very soon. But it is possible for them to download a form of that paper form. So I'll get that in today or tomorrow, and we'll do it.
Nancy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
What do they need to take to get the photo ID? What information do they need if they go to the registration office?
That is a really good question, and I'm not sure I know the total answer to that. Does anybody know? I'm suspecting they need their birth certificate to prove that they need something to prove that they are them. And if they don't have a photo ID, they don't have a driver's license. So I'm going to say they need their birth certificate, but I don't know that for sure. I will try to find out.
That's a good question, isn't it?
A really good question.
I know that when we've worked with homeless populations, that's what we recommend they do, is to go to 2020 Hampton, and 2020 Hampton can help them to get, some kind of identification that, and it's not only that they need identification, they need to know, how to go about, voting. If are they, I guess if they don't have a specific, that somehow they have to also be connected to the county, right? It has to be clear that right.
Yeah.
So
And as I'll say later,
that's something we should learn more about, don't you think, Nancy?
Absolutely should. And I have not thought about that, but we do need to know that. And I'll try to find it and include that information on this page. I'll call voter registration after we finish with this and try to include that on this page.
I love how this process is helping us understand where our own
Lack of knowledge, yes.
knowledge is limited. So that's very helpful.
That's right. And the only thing so far we've found that we can deal with, we've got the I need to get the new paper form, and we need to find out about ID for registration at offices. But if we find anything else, let me know, because I want to improve this and make it workable. And people who are seeing this later recorded, hopefully all this will have been resolved by the time you see it.
On the guidelines, this is Phyllis on the guidelines for the in-person. It says we have a brochure that lists acceptable types of photo identifications. So
Yeah,
we can
the
just
photo-
find.
The photo ID, and we'll come to a thing where we talk about those in a little bit. The types of photo ID, if they have a photo ID, we know what those can be. It's what if they don't have a photo ID, and that's very few people. I have never run into a person like that.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't either. Yeah.
but there's no, anytime, as soon as you go out, you're gonna be talking to anybody, so who knows? Before we go into all the details, I just want to remind you briefly that we do more than just register. And I'm not going to talk about these in great detail, but just to remind you that just by being out there trying to register voters, we're reminding people about the whole voting process, and we're publicizing voting. One thing that's important to do is to get people to check their registration, because if they haven't voted recently, if they've moved, a lot of things can go wrong. People will think they're registered. I work at the polls sometimes, and people will come in and say, oh, I'm registered, but guess what? They're not, because they haven't voted in 10 years, or they've moved to a new county, or the last time I worked at the poll, somebody was registered in Virginia and was like, oh, I have to register in South Carolina. And we were like, yeah, you do. That's how it goes. We also educate people about candidates and issues. And we're also getting out the vote. We're reminding people of the date of the vote and the necessity to do it. So don't forget that we have that, that all of that is part of our role being there. Because you can feel a little, sometimes you'll go to vote and everybody you talk to will already be registered to vote. And you feel like, oh, I'm wasting my time. I shouldn't be here. But I don't think you are. I think you're reminding them to vote. You're reminding them that voting is important. You're representing voting to them. If they, let's go on down here. So here are some details of things you may need to look up. This may answer some of the questions that people may have. Who can register to vote? They have to be a citizen. They have to be 18. They have to live in this county or the county where they're going to register. We can register people in other counties. We just have to be sure to send the registration form. We can't register people in other states, though, if they're not not living in Richardson County. It's fine to register somebody who lives in Spartanburg or Orangeburg or something, and we can mail it to them, but not if they live out of state. We can't do anything with that. They should not be under a court order declaring them mentally incompetent. I don't know how many people are going to tell you that's going on, but it might show up when the registration form goes in. An important one, and we can talk about this later, but just to be part of this, they shouldn't be in prison, and they shouldn't have to be on parole, and that's something we'll talk about. However, if they haven't yet been tried, even though they may have an indictment, they can still vote if they haven't yet been convicted, if they haven't gone to trial. And then they must have a current state or federal photo ID. And here are some of the things that are acceptable is this brochure. There's also a new brochure that I need to take a picture of that shows you. Basically, it's these things: a South Carolina driver's license. There's an ID card that looks like a driver's license, but it doesn't let you drive. But DMV issues it, and they can go down same place they get their driver's license and just say, "I'm not driving. I just want an ID card," and they can get it. $10. It used to be $10, might be 20 by now. They can get the voter registration card with photo. They can have a federal military ID, United States passport. They can also, and that's not on here, one reason we need to replace this with the new one. They also can use a gun permit. Yes. Unfortunately, they cannot use their college ID, but they can use the gun permit.
Wow.
Unfortunately.
Nancy,
Yeah.
I just called Lexington voter registration.
To get a photo ID, she said just bring a light bill or a lease to prove residency, but that they're not asking for birth certificate or anything else, and they will give you, and I don't know if Richland would say the same, but
Well, I
sounds
will ask them before I write that down, but that's nice to know. And you had a question, Pamela? Pamela, did you unmute
Yeah.
yourself?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. That would be fine. I understand an electric bill or something for someone, but if you're 18, the chances of you being the name on that electric bill would
Right.
be, so the issue that you're describing would still be in existence for someone 18 years of age that hasn't yet stepped into the world, so to say.
That's true. And those people may have to come up with something that
but
works for them.
But I'm wondering if maybe a letter from their school, and this is just throwing things out as a possibility, but a letter from their school, if they're still in high school, that might be,
Maybe.
not college, but because you can come from all over for college, but high school might be.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
also thinking that homeless people might not have any kind of idea like that.
Yeah.
So I will also
Mhm.
call Richland and go through this, all of this in detail about what about if somebody's young or homeless and doesn't have those things. So we will find out, and I will add it to the page.
And you're talking about this, just as a sidebar, I always pass the Salvation Army Center on Elmwood Street. What do they call it? Transitions. Maybe once we update that page, we might want to share it with them because they could help register quite a number of people,
Right.
on voter registration.
That is a good idea. Okay. And we've got, there's lots of stuff we can talk about. Let's go over the rest of this just so you know what's here. And I'm always having trouble getting to the page I want to get to. Here we go. Okay. And then we still got to go back. Okay, that's who can register. Now, here's an interesting thing that doesn't require that kind of detailed knowledge, but you will run into. People will say, I don't want to register. And they give all these reasons. And we could talk about this all day. So I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail right now, but you might want to read over it. These are some of the arguments people will give you, that you'll say, and you have to be really, a lot of people are just going to walk on by if they don't want to register, and they won't even answer you. No, I've never had anybody be rude to me, I will say, for those of you who haven't done it. Usually people just ignore you if they don't want to do it. But sometimes they'll say, oh, I don't want to vote. And if you can ask them in a pleasant and friendly way, oh, why not? Can you tell me why not? And they might answer with some of these things, that voting doesn't make a difference. And we've got some details about the elections that are decided by very few votes where voting does make a difference. And incidentally, this might be a good time to bring up that down ballot races are important. That's where people, some of the most important people in our politics today started with something like city council or school board. So remind them that too. They worry about being in a jury. No, the jury does not come from registered voters. It comes from driver's license as well. So not registering is not going to keep them off the jury, unfortunately for them. If they're registered, if they have a driver's license, they're probably on the list of potential jurors. They'll say they're too busy. This is a good time to remind them about early voting. Absentee voting, we're going to talk about, isn't a great solution, but it's possible for some people. And remind them that they are a member of our society, and it's their responsibility as a citizen. They're supposed to vote. Everybody that can vote should vote. Not that they do, but we're trying to change that. They'll say voting is rigged. There are some problems, but votes in South Carolina are audited regularly, at least. I have disabilities that make it hard. Remind them that there's curbside voting. If they can get to the poll, somebody will bring the machine out for them to vote. Then they may say that machines might be hacked, and we have paper ballots as backup, so the hacking won't really happen. Also, and one of the reasons I really get into this is that some people will sort of say, no, I don't want to vote, but they may be felons. So if you can find a nice way to ask, are you worried about being a felon? Sometimes I'll say, oh, well, that's too bad. If you know anybody who can't vote because they've been in jail, tell them the rules about felons voting. I don't know. It's a hard question to ask, but it's important information to get to them. Some people may have literacy or hearing or sight problems. Remind them that there's assistance for that when they go to the polls. Somebody that they can get Braille, they can get audio only if they bring earphones. Somebody can help them. There are lots of ways people with physical disabilities can vote without problems. So
Nancy,
question.
We've put up a sign on our table that says some information about former felons, or that you can vote if you've done these things, paid all your fines, served all your time. You don't want to walk up to somebody and say, you look like a former felon.
Right, that's what I mean. Finding a nice way to ask them.
Well, your way was very nice. I thought that was nice.
It's the only thing you can, because sometimes people don't see the sign at the table. I agree, the sign is really great. And
often it's for a family member. Oh, my uncle could register this. Yeah,
right,
so
people will tell you that. And we're going to look in a second at the situation for felons. So we'll come back to that. So this is just to remember that you don't have to automatically take no for an answer if you can do it in a kind and polite way. If you can't find a kind and polite way to do it, then it's probably better just to let them walk on by and hope somebody else gets them. Let me talk briefly about absentee ballots. Absentee ballots used to be the same as early voting, and some people don't know that it's changed. It used to be that you could go into the office and do absentee voting right there. Now that's early voting. You go to the same place, but it's early voting. You do have to you have to get first request an application. You can do that by phone, by regular mail, or in person. You can't, as far as I know, does anybody know if this is wrong? I don't think there's a way to request an absentee ballot online. I haven't found one. I don't think there is. I think you have to call, go in, or request it by mail. So it's complicated. They don't like the absentee ballots.
I think you can. Isn't an absentee ballot if you're over 65 and then you can vote by mail? Is that what absentee ballot is?
Well, that's one of the reasons why you can have an absentee ballot, but
you can request that online, because I always do it online.
Okay, let's look at that in just a second. Let me finish going over this, and then we'll look and see if that's online.
Yeah, I thought that had changed, but Marianne, that may be right.
Right, yeah.
I thought we weren't letting anything happen online. But
let me just finish this while we're on this page, and then we'll look at that. They must supply a mailing address, and then they'll get the ballot, and then the ballots have to be returned either by mail or in person. So it's complicated, and they have to be able to get it, to get the application in 11 days before the election, and they have to get the ballot itself in by 7 p.m. on election day. So you have to really plan in advance with absentee voting. It's not something you can do, you know, the day before. You just kind of stuck with it. And to be sure that it gets there, we recommend that people mail it at least a week ahead of time because of the mail being like it is. Otherwise, they need to take it. They cannot, another thing to remind them is that they cannot take it to the poll. The poll will say, no, you've got to go take it to your county registration office. In Richland County, that's 2020 Hampton Street. So there's more about absentee ballots here. Let's look and see if that, yeah, here we go. Is there a place to request? How can I vote absentee? Submit your request for an application on by as early as January 1. Call, visit, or send your request by U.S. mail. I don't see a place on here to request it online. Marion, I will also ask about that and see if maybe I'm missing
Yeah.
where it is. Do
You
you know?
Go
you
ahead.
know-
Nancy, it
Yeah.
may be at the discretion of each office, because when my daughter was overseas, the Lexington voter registration office told me, they gave me an email address and said, send it to this person who's in charge of doing that to make your request.
Okay, that's good to know. But when was that, Sharon?
Oh, it was a couple of years ago.
See, I'm afraid a lot of this stuff changed when they changed to early voting. They really tightened up on absentee, so it might be different now. And that's why I want to call and talk to them about it. Good
Okay.
question, and I will ask them. So once again, I need to see if I can get back to the, yeah, here we go.
Nancy, I think it was 2022 when that
Yeah,
switch changed, or even 2023 possibly.
yeah.
From more early voting options, but stricter absentee.
Absentee. Right. So a lot of people who used to vote absentee, like me, actually vote early now that that's available. But people that are literally absent, you know, it is more complicated. And before the last time I voted out of the country was 1994. So things are really different. You know, back then there was no email, so you had to do it either in person or by US mail. Complicated. Let's see. Here's about the ID that they need, the photo ID. And this is important to know again. I'll just go over it one more time. South Carolina driver's license. And they don't have to have this to register. They will have to have it to vote. They will have to have it if they do online registration. So a South Carolina driver's license, DMV ID card, just like a driver's license, a concealed weapons permit. But I don't think they need a permit anymore, right? Since they just changed the law. So maybe we'll be erasing it. I mean, I think they could still use this if they have it, but I'll ask about that too. I don't, even if they know yet, that may not have been decided, but I will find out and clarify that. That law was just passed this week, allowing people to just carry without permit. A registration card with a photo, a passport, a federal military ID, any Department of Defense photo ID or Department of Veterans Affairs benefit card. Notice though that it does not include, again, any kind of school permit. That is not acceptable, unfortunately, because a lot of people have only that. Okay, what address? And this kind of covers partly where they might be. Because we have a lot of colleges in Columbia, we really need to pay attention to college students. They've got two choices. They can register at their college dorm or apartment address and vote at the appropriate precinct for that address. That's one option. Or they can register at their home address and vote absentee. If they live in Virginia but are going to school in South Carolina, for example, they either have to establish South Carolina residency, and incidentally, as far as voting is concerned, we don't have a long residency period, but I'm not sure about for driver's license. So I'll ask about that too. I may have to call DMV for that. Or they can vote, they can register their home ID and they can vote absentee. I think voting absentee in their home state is probably what a lot of them do. But people who want to establish SC residency, I think that for school purposes, it usually takes 2 years, but for voting itself, there is no residency limit. So I'm not really clear. This is going to be a DMV rule, and I'll have to ask them. I wish I knew that. I'm sorry, I don't. Let's see if there's anything. That's it. So that's one. You might think that we would have to worry about military people, but they are taken care of out there. I think most of them vote absentee, but anyway, usually you're not going to run into military people. And some people who tell you they don't want to register may be military and may have military reasons for doing it. Now, this is one where what if they've moved? And this is something you will run into. What if people have moved? Okay, it depends on when they moved and where they moved and how they moved. It's a complicated thing if they've moved. If they moved 30 days or more before the election, they should update their registration online. They should first update their address with the Department of Motor Vehicles. If it's less than 30 days before the election, this is where we run into problems. If they moved within their precinct, and you can look that up in SC Votes, that's in 411, those will tell you what precinct they used to live in and what precinct they live in now. They can update their address at the polling place and vote a regular ballot. The note, this is only important if you're working at the polls, but they might need to know it. Their actual address does not have to be the same that's on their ID unless they move to another county or state. But if they moved within Richland County, it doesn't matter if their driver's license doesn't match where they actually live right now. If they move to a different precinct, they can vote. And this doesn't have anything to do with registration, but it's a question that will come up. So I'll tell you now. They'll have at the poll, they'll have a thing called a fail-safe, which is a ballot, basically doesn't have the local elections. It just has the more, but it has the local elections to be checked against when they file their correct address. They cannot vote if they move to a residence in another county and didn't update. They're not eligible to vote unless they updated their addresses before the 30-day deadline. If they move to South Carolina after the 30-day registration deadline, they're not eligible to vote. They can't register. They must register at least 30 days before the election. We won't be out there trying to register people. For example, in June, the primary is June 11th. We will cut off registration May 11th. So you won't be running into that, but somebody might ask or have a question. Fail-safe, again, has only federal, state, countywide, and municipal-wide offices and not local ones. And so that's why it's fail-safe. So they can vote in their previous precinct with a provisional ballot or go and change at the registration office where they live. You can re-register. But I have noticed, and I don't know if, again, I don't know, the clerks have been letting people vote in their new precinct with fail-safe ballots. So tell them to go to the most convenient place first, and maybe that'll work. is all I can tell you. Because I think that kind of depends on the clerk at the voting location.
Nancy, can I go back to the absentee voting thing?
Sure.
Okay, now that I've checked to see what I've done before and looked at the site, to get an absentee ballot, you can call and they will mail you one. And then
Right.
you have to send it in by mail. And then there is an actual place on their website where you can check the status of your absentee ballot.
Right, but is there a place where you can request it, Marion?
Yes. Oh, no, you have to call to request it.
Right, and that's what we've got on here, so we don't need to
Yeah.
change it. You can't
Right.
request, they've really made it hard to vote absentee. I don't think they, I think that there was a lot of interest in getting rid of the absentee voting. Okay, let's go back and see. I may have covered everything that we need to have. Okay. People have changed. These are more things about what address and ID people can use. What if people's name has changed? Okay, they have a complicated thing and they need to be doing this right away. If you run into somebody who is married and is still registered under their maiden name, for example, or who's had a court-ordered name change or divorced, or there's all kind of ways people change their names. First, they have to change their names with Social Security. That's the first step. Then 48 hours later, they can't do this until it's kind of gelled in the Social Security. Then they have to go to DMV and get, with their marriage license or court-ordered documentation, divorce papers maybe, but whatever. They have to go and change their names at DMV. Then they have to do a new application. There's a DMV application I know exists, but working at the polls, too many people have come through and we have not had them on our rolls, and they've said, oh, at DMV, they said I would be in, but they aren't. So that's why I put on here that they do it separately, because I don't
Nancy,
the DMV is working. Yeah.
can they vote provisional?
With their names, that again,
My daughter did vote provisional after her divorce when she went back to her maiden name.
yeah. And in that case, they'd probably have to go through all this and then, if the person votes provisional, and this is getting away from registration, if a person votes provisional, they go into the poll and vote, but then with the provisional ballot, they have to come back to the voter registration office for a hearing about the provisional ballot. And at that point, they'll have to bring in all this documentation about name change. So again, I don't know if that's the same way it was for your daughter, but that's the way it seems to be now. Did she have to go in later and show her ID and stuff?
Let me check with the authority here. Bob, did Dina have to go in after the provisional ballot and show them that she had a name change?
I think she did, but I'm not sure, Sharon.
We think she did, but we're not sure.
Well, that's what they say now, is with the
Okay,
provisional ballot, you
okay.
have to show up. So,
All right.
and you have to give your documentation. The provisional ballot is off the subject of registration, but it does exist. You can pretty much do a provisional ballot with if you don't have a photo ID, if you don't have any kind of registration, if they don't find you. Most of the time they'll let you do a provisional ballot, but you do have to then show the documentation later. It just gives you 3 or 4 days to get that same documentation. So it doesn't really solve the problem if you just don't have that stuff. You're kind of stuck with it.
Nancy, I just wanted to say, if you don't mind, I think that your knowledge as a poll worker that I don't have, I have never worked the polls, really benefits you as someone who does this kind of work.
It's
Because
helpful.
we don't usually talk to them, a lot about provisional ballots and fail-safe ballots and all of
Right.
that. Most of us haven't had that experience with it. But one of the things I would say is that, as much as we sometimes want to assist someone, we're eager and to assist them to change their registration or to, be able to have, help them do that. It is important to let them know. And I've had this happen to me where I thought, oh yeah, we're going to get this change of registration in, and then I talk with the voter longer and realize they aren't really ready to do that because they haven't changed their ID, or they don't, the addresses are going to not match. So there is a lot of complication for people in terms of who have moved or changed their names, that they need to kind of be doing things in a good sequential order, or they could find themselves, not having the correct ID once they go to a polling place, or,
Right.
some
And
other
the
kind of
important-
issue.
The important thing to remember is that even though the provisional ballot gives them some time, it doesn't erase the need to show up with the right stuff eventually. So, it's only a temporary thing, the provisional ballot, and it's usually more trouble. So a lot of people don't do it. It's a lot of trouble. Yeah, other question?
Yes, could you just describe the provisional ballot for me? What exactly does that entail?
They go to the poll and they don't have whatever they need, and the poll clerk. A weird thing is that the clerk is the head honcho at voting, and the managers are the little minions like me. The clerk will have them fill out a form that's the provisional ballot at the polling place and will turn it in. But then they will get a notification, and the clerk will tell them, you're going to have to go to 2020 Hampton Street if you're in Richmond, or to the voting office in Lexington, or wherever. You have to go to the voting office, and there will be a hearing, and you will have to take the documentation that you don't have now, like a photo ID or a change of name form or something like that. So I'm just saying it exists, but it's not a permanent solution. It's just buying time. The fail-safe ballot doesn't require that. Fail-safe just means they're not going to vote on an election that requires them to live at their old address, like their city council person for their district or something like that. Whereas the provisional ballot just buys time, and that's all there is to it.
But it does allow you to vote if you show up and you don't have what you need and you didn't realize that, you can at least place your vote.
Right. You can at least vote. And that happens. I mean, it happens. There's always one or two people at every election who's doing a provisional ballot. The clerks don't always want to do it, but people and voters should. And there's no way for us to tell them that because voting is so removed from registration, but voters should insist on a provisional ballot. Let's look at the voters.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Can I? I thought, just to make clear for me, on a provisional ballot, they limit who you could vote for, though, don't
No,
they?
that's the fail-safe. But I'm sorry, this is so complicated. Fail-safe limits who you can vote for to state, county, and national. Provisional doesn't limit who you can vote for. It just buys you some time to come back with your documentation.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Fail-safe is one thing and provisional is another. And we don't really run into those as registers unless when we're registering, unless there's a question that somebody might have. And so that's how this came up. But I don't really have much on here. Well, I do have some stuff on here about it, because it has to, both of those have to do with registering in a distant sense. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, and if we have time, we'll do question and answer at the end. So soldiers and people out of the country. The Army informs them, so we don't really have to worry much about it. However, we do sometimes run into somebody who might be traveling or have a friend or a relative who is working overseas or will be traveling. So this is a link to where SC Votes. I hope this link is working. I didn't check. Yeah. We'll tell them all the things that they can do. they're covered under a thing called the UOCAVA, the UCOVAC. And they, again, it's complicated. It's like it is an absentee ballot, but it's complicated. Okay, the accessibility tool will guide them through the process of submitting the postcard application. And this may be what your daughter did, because she was out of the country. So there is a way to get started online if you're out of the country, but this does not work for people that just will be on vacation in Florida or something. This is somebody who's living and working in another country, goes to this. And there's things that you can get from the county elections office. You can turn in a state absentee ballot application, but that requires mail or phone call to get. And you must register to vote. So anyway, this link is here for the people that are out of state. So let's see. Homeless people. So hard because they should be able to vote. And sometimes we go, I'm looking at chat to see if there's any question. Yeah, most of this is information. Okay. People who don't have permanent addresses, they can use the address of the shelter. I'm sorry, this number is out of whack. They can use the address of a shelter if that's where they stay. For example, Transitions in Columbia, Oliver Gospel in Columbia. If they don't live in a shelter, they can use the elections office address, whatever county they're in, 2020 Hampton in Richland. They may not use a P.O. box. Sometimes homeless people have P.O. boxes, but they cannot use that. It has to be a physical address. They will need some kind of photo ID. So they have some options about addresses, but they're under the same requirements about photo ID that everybody else is. So they need to do that. So I hope that if we go to Transitions or any place like that, we do it early so they have time to go out and get that straightened out if they don't have it. And finally, people convicted of felonies. And again, how to find those people, it requires tact. And don't ask if you don't feel like you have a good way to ask. But if you find out somebody has been convicted of a felony, or then this is the link to go to. They can vote, but some things that are required. First of all, they have to have served their complete sentence, including probation and parole. And a lot of people who aren't on parole are still on probation. So you have to ask them, are you on probation? Do you have to be supervised? Do you have to report to anybody? Second, they have to have paid all the costs and probation fees. However, there's no way that I talked to the elections office about this, and they don't really have a way to check up on the fees right now. So I don't know how that's a big deal in Florida right now, but in South Carolina, we have it. They can, if they're eligible to register by age, citizenship, and some kind of residence, they can register. If they were registered before they were convicted, they have to re-register after they get out. This is the point about not needing evidence of completing their sentence and payment. Usually they don't seem to check on that, but if they need it, they can get it from the courts, from the parole board, or from the Department of Corrections. Even the elections office didn't really know about this. So it's very unlikely that they're going to be checked on this, but they should be aware that they could be. So wise not to register unless you've completed everything, is what I would say. Any questions about felons? Here's a chat. Okay, just a comment. Okay, let's see. I think those are all the address questions, yeah. And actually, I think that's everything we really need to cover here. I have some improvements to make. Thank you for helping me find those. And again, I want to remind you about finding all this, that up here at the top. Sorry. I just can't get rid of this thing. But at any rate, that at the top of the screen, there's a drop down that easily takes you to everything. And let me see, one more. If they're not voting in, for example, that's a good question about if they're not voting in local elections, like about a month ago, we had the Democratic primary and the Republican primary in South Carolina, and they didn't need fail-safe for that because that didn't, where you live doesn't make a difference in terms of voting for a national candidate. And we'll say that those elections are run by the parties, not by, I mean, they are under the control of the parties as well as the states. So occasionally a party may have a rule, but they won't have a rule about that because it doesn't matter where in South Carolina you live, as long as you're registered. Okay, I'm gonna stop share for a minute. We've run for an hour, so we can wind up as soon as we finish with all the questions and so on that anybody has. Sharon, you had a hand up.
I think you answered it, Nancy.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, let me just remind you of a couple of things. You will be, if you are new to this, which I know some of you are, you will be going with an organizer who has experience. Often it's somebody like Christine with or Sharon with tons of experience. Sometimes somebody not quite so experienced, but they will know most of what we've gone over today, or will at least know how to look it up. The second thing I want to remind you is if you can bring your phone, the phone is best because if you bring your computer or iPad, well, some iPads can use phone too. If you're using something that needs internet, you're very likely not going to have internet wherever you're registering voters. So it's good to be able to try this on your phone. You might want to look at it yourself on your phone before you go to register, just to be sure that you can find all of these details because they're easy to access that way. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to thank you all for coming, and we will end today.
Thank you, Nancy. That was
you.
very thorough.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Oh, and thank you to Betty and Mary and David and everybody that helped create that site. It was not
Thank you,
work.
Joyce. Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you so much, Nancy. You answered a lot of questions that I
Well,
had.
good. And feel free to email me. I think you all have my email when I sent out the link. So if I will try to update with those questions that came up. But if you have other questions, don't hesitate to ask because it will help me to look stuff up.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.